Hello all, and welcome to Brewing with Jim, hosted by Jim Brewington. Jim is a pastor and a teacher, and has served in these roles for the past 45 years. He has worked in small churches and mega churches, primarily as a teacher serving both the hearing and the deaf population. We have surveyed the students here at CVCS and do our best to create a genuine conversation around the talking points the students want to know most about. Thank you all for listening and taking time to brew on Life's Questions with Jim. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Brewing with Jim. I am Grady, your producer, and as always we have Jim. How are you doing today, Jim?
I'm good, and I'm glad to be back. Thanks. I'm looking forward to this topic we've talked about.
Yes, and I say welcome back because if you are turning in for the first time or you did not listen to the previous episode, this is going to be part 2 of talking about the conditions that hold us back. What are they? Where do they come from? And then how do we go forward with them? So last time we focused on what were the conditions that people face. There's ADD, ADHD. We have lots of students, lots of our friends, family members deal with a lot of different problems, a lot of different obstacles. We're human, and I guess that is the joy of being one.
It's the human condition.
It is the human condition. We talked about anxiety. We talked about cerebral palsy, PTSD, abuse. We had mentioned
dwarfism. We talked about,
and we had talked about one of our speakers in the past that we've seen at church or had interactions with him, Nick Vujicic, who has no arms and no legs, and how he has overcome and become a great spectacle of overcoming his conditions of lack of limbs.
Yes.
And today we would like to focus on how do we come forth, how do we grow forward, and how do we know we have our conditions, we know what we're dealing with in our lives, but how do we go forth through them? Today we'll have a couple, we don't know about answers, but some ideas and some launching off points to go through these problems, and also some biblical characters, and again, more parts of our lives that we get to express with you about how maybe we have overcome something and we can inspire you to do the same. So
That's a huge introduction and a clear introduction, and thank you for it, and a nice recap of what we had in what I guess we could call part 1. It is part of the human condition that we all have something that isn't right with us. We know that everything is broken. The world is broken. This is biblical, and it's also experiential. Governments are broken. Churches are broken. The schools are broken. Our bodies are broken. Our minds are broken. The system and finances broken. Everything's broken. And it will be restored one day when there is a new heaven and a new earth. But right now we have to live in a body that is unredeemed. Our spirits can be redeemed, but our body is unredeemed. And if you need proof of that, or if you want to just look at me, or as I look in the mirror, what happened? We live in a world that is unredeemed, that is cursed. And we have an enemy running around trying to deceive us and separate us and keep us from loving and receiving love. And everything's broken. Now, how do we live to become what God wants us to be if we are this broken? And I think I want to address that I don't have the answers. You mentioned that already. I can't contrive or create ways to get things done with the different situations that people find themselves in, the conditions they find themselves in. But I really want to address the attitude that this isn't going to stop me. This is not going to hold me back. I am not going to sit for the rest of my life in a Barcalounger or under a tree and watch the weather go by and give up. That's the attitude, and I'm saying this at the beginning of this show, and I'll probably, I remember, will say it at the end of this show because that's the whole thrust of it. Jesus himself was broken on the cross, but God can turn a crucifixion into a resurrection. He can turn all things for good for those who love him and are called in accordance with his purpose. Keep that in mind, everyone. Now, I was vulnerable somewhat, quite a bit, actually, I think, in the first part of this topic on the other episode of the podcast, in saying that I have things about me that don't work right. My knees don't work right. I don't have a meniscus in either knee, and it's bone on bone. I have arthritis in my hands, and I teach sign language, and I'm an interpreter of American Sign Language. That's a problem, but it doesn't stop me. I have to do some of things in a different way. I cannot climb a ladder anymore because I have balance issues. So how do I get the gutters cleaned? I always climbed the ladder and cleaned the gutters before our rainy season started. I have to do it in a different way. I have to find a different way to do it. And I have found a different way to do it.
And then, Jim, you'd also mentioned that you're 79, correct?
Years old.
Yeah, years
Yes.
old. Yeah, you're 79 years
Knocking
old.
on the door of the octogenarian. Creepy, isn't it?
That's right. Octogenarian, yeah, 80.
Yeah.
But even that
Did you really have to mention that?
That brings to the point of even age is an obstacle. But you're teaching 6 classes. You're cleaning rain gutters apparently still, and it's rainy season right now. And like that in and of itself is an obstacle. So, and you had made a mention last show or in previous shows that's your age and what you do is not going to slow you down. You should be in a couch lounging
people
under
tell me
a tree and whatnot.
People tell me that. Why aren't you retired?
Yeah.
Well, that word and that concept is not in the Bible, and I don't really understand it either. The teaching I do, I love. I love doing the teaching. Let's do a podcast on that. Maybe the next one, next week. I love, I don't know if love, that may be too strong a word. I really enjoy doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Because I have been told from feedback that we are reaching people and giving them information that is changing their lives for the better.
Yeah. And even going into the rest of this episode is just like finding your passion, finding something that you love, finding your purpose. You might have these obstacles. You might have age, or for me, I have a speech impediment, and I have a podcast now, and it was one thing that I told my family, or I thought to myself when I was in high school, I would never get in front of a microphone again. And it's just one of those redeeming qualities.
What's your speech impediment? I haven't seen it.
I have a stutter.
I have never seen that.
Yeah, so I had a stutter growing up. I probably started when I first started speaking, and then I went through speech therapy from as soon as I got into public school, so kindergarten, all the way through. I ended up doing speech therapy until I was about 24, 25.
It was very successful.
Yeah, I kept bombing interviews for jobs. I was so nervous, and it was how my anxiety had showed up, and if you don't interview well, you don't really get a job. And so it was one of those things where I had to take the next step.
I think I have a speech impediment too. I've often had to talk with my foot in my mouth because I live by my words and I die by my words.
That one never goes away from me.
No, but I have learned to at least talk with my foot in my mouth.
Yeah, and then on that topic, because I was going to share it either today or another day, but one of my role models growing up, when I was in high school, I was big in the baseball world. I worked out in the gym 5, 6, 7 days a week. My athletic trainer, the guy I idolized, he was my role model. He had a speech impediment, and he was what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an athletic trainer. I wanted to work in the gym and just stay there and do my thing and be a chiropractor or something along the medical field there.
Let me ask you, when of course you knew you had the speech impediment.
Yeah.
And the stuttering. What attitude did you have when you were frustrated by that? Was it, I can't do these things, or was I'm going to live a good life anyway? or I'm going to overcome it. What was your thought process?
At the beginning, I said it was most difficult in high school because I had to take Spanish class. We didn't have an ASL program at my school. I would have loved ASL. It would have saved me from my stuttering, but never had that opportunity.
I have stuttered in ASL. Go on.
Yes. And so for me, it was I had to get through my stuttering thing because I needed to speak Spanish to get an A in the class.
Right.
So it was kind of that immovable object that I kind of just kept running into. And so I sought speech therapy, and it was just something that I had to train myself out of and learn tools, and something that I knew I had to get through because there are so many jobs that rely on communication. Teaching in itself is public speaking.
There are some people, of course, who have conditions that can't be, or it's highly unlikely that they will ever go away. The condition won't go away. Amputees, people with various self-images. Now, self-image can be worked on, but that's very difficult too. There are conditions that cannot go away. God could make anything go away, but it's not really his style, as far as my experience is, that he would reattach an arm that is missing, or that you. Although I wouldn't for a moment say he couldn't, I just don't. That's not. People are going to have to overcome and find another way of doing things, or give up. And the whole idea that I'm trying to convey to everybody is don't give up. Let me tell you about some broken people that I have read about in God's Word. People, of course, who have existed, and what God did with them. Abraham. Abraham was too old. God called him and told him he was going to have generations as many and offspring as many as the stars in the sky and the sands on the seashore, which, by the way, biblically are two different groups of people, but I'm not here to do that right now. Elijah.
Well, Abraham would be like you having a son right now.
Nice. Thank you very much. Yeah. That won't be happening. And by the way, no, I don't even know if I want to go there. Because I had cancer, I will not be doing that, having any more children. Elijah was suicidal. And I know people and have talked with people this very week who struggle with suicidal ideation and depression that is so deep they don't want to get out of bed. That is incapacitating.
Yeah, that's
but the
something
attitude
I dealt with
is
too.
I am not going to go through with the suicidal ideation. It's probably not a good idea to show up in the throne room of God uninvited. So,
high school, I had a bout of depression, and lasted for 2 years. Didn't escalate to the suicidal ideation, but definitely dealt with the depression aspect of that, and growing up and feeling alone and a failure sometimes, and everything hangs on the edge of a thread when you're 15 years old and your hormones are going out of whack and whatnot.
And especially when the greatest desire in high school is to be noticed and respected and befriended by other people. Peer pressure is huge in high school. Joseph in the Bible, Old Testament, coat of many colors.
Yes, that's right.
He was abused. He was abandoned. He was tricked by his brothers. He was rejected. And maybe the biggest detriment of all happened to Job. Job lost everything. Lost his family, lost his home, lost all his possessions, lost his friends, lost everything. Moses was called by God to speak for him to the people. He had a speech impediment.
Yep.
And he said, I can't do this.
Changed my life.
I can't do that. Did it really? Mm-hmm. And you knew about Moses.
Yeah, so kind of finishing that idea, like my personal trainer, he was the guy I wanted to be. He could do it. Why couldn't I?
Exactly.
And so part of my reasoning for this show is like, hey, you're not alone, and we've said this before. Hey, you have a condition. You're not alone. Moses was there. It's biblical. He was one of the greatest leaders. He wrote the Torah. Who am I? Like
Torah.
Who am I? Like who am I? I have a speech impediment. Moses. Once I figured out Moses did, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then the King's Speech came out when I was in high school too, and one of the a great movie about a king with a speech impediment. And it was like, I'm not alone in this. God has used so many other people before.
That's right.
And in this position. So please go on.
Gideon was afraid. He was fearful. He lived with fear. There are some people who live with fear and therefore don't leave the house. And that was not Gideon. He did what he was called to do. Samson was a womanizer. And I think I can tell you that there are people who are impeded by the desires of sex. And it's so overwhelming and time-consuming that they can't get anything else done. That can be worked through as well. Rahab was a prostitute. The Samaritan woman was divorced.
Yeah, the one at the well.
Yes, the one at the well. Go and sin no more. That one. Noah was drunk. But he had enormous faith because God told him to build an ark. What's an ark? Oh, I'll tell you how to do this. Well, what's a flood? What's rain?
What is
He
rain?
didn't know rain.
Yeah.
There was no rain. The moisture came up through the soil, and there was obedience from Noah, and put all these people on the ark. Put the 8 people on the ark.
All these animals.
And the animals, well, he didn't have to put the animals on the ark. God collected the animals, so thanks for that help. Jeremiah was young. Jeremiah went, 40 years without seeing one fruit of his ministry, and was not, I can't say he wasn't disappointed, but he was not stopped by lack of success. He went on.
Could you say the same thing about Timothy in the New Testament? Because you have the verse, what is it? You shouldn't balk at what you say because you're young, or something along those lines.
Don't disrespect the youth.
Yes, don't disrespect the youth, because Timothy was young in his ministry.
Or condescend to them, yes.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like that one too. It's helped me in my young years.
Yeah, okay. Jacob was a cheater. David was a murderer. King David, a murderer and an adulterer.
Yep.
And God used him. Jonah ran from God. Naomi was a widow. Peter denied Christ 3 times. Oh, I'll never deny you. Before the cock crows tomorrow morning, 3 times. And did God use him? Did Christ use him afterwards? Absolutely, he did. And we could go on. There are many more. Martha worried about everything. Worrying about things, by the way, is a disability. If you worry about something, you have to live it twice. And during the time you're worrying,
a lot of it's self-fulfilling prophecy too. You made it happen.
It could be self-fulfilling. I think they're a great percentage. I don't know how to measure the statistics. I think it would be impossible, but most of the time, those things don't actually happen. It just doesn't become real. I don't want to go much farther, except to say the disciples, they fell asleep while they were praying. Is that bad? I do that. Falling asleep in the arms of the Father is not a bad deal. I think he's not unimpressed because I'm falling asleep in prayer, but I do that sometimes.
Well, you have the guy who fell asleep during Paul's sermon.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, out the window.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. And Paul himself, Paul was a Pharisee, and he was persecuted. God used all these people. They were all broken, and so am I, and so are you, and so are you listeners, each one of you. Now, please don't give up. Please know you can be used.
That's not the end of the podcast.
It's not the end of your life either. God may not get rid of the condition, but he can get rid of the control it has on your life. And that, I think, is the prayer. Help me find another way to do what you want me to do. Now, what does he want me to do? Well, it's not necessarily produce success or make money or recreate in a way that's pleasing to me.
Mm-hmm.
He wants us to love one another. And there is nothing, none of our impediments that we talked about that would cause us to stop that. He can get rid of the control that our condition has on our life. Now, that doesn't mean that that I can do everything that I would like to do with my condition. I can't do everything. I can't hike the way I used to. I grew up and most of my adult life loving to hike. I can't do that anymore. But can I do something else? Yes. And I do not have to give up in my life. Don't pretend the condition isn't there. It is. The condition is there. But don't let it cause you to stop living and producing and creating and loving. I would ask God, I suggest that all of us ask God to use me as a tool to show other people what his love looks like. And then he will do that. I know he will do that. We all are born with the capacity to love. And we are born with the capacity and the desire, the need to be loved. Just go on with that. Now, how do you do that? I don't know. Different people in different situations, knowing different people. But please don't let your condition stop you or your ambition to be as God wants you to be the person that God wants you to be. And what is the purpose? Well, there are 5 purposes that we've talked about before on other podcasts. But the greatest of all the purposes is to love him and to love one another. Mm-hmm. And nothing is going to stop that. What condition would stop that? I can't think of one.
Me either. One thing, another biblical character was Zacchaeus. I'm not vertically gifted, and neither was he. And I'm thinking of again, a lot of the things come back to high school because I was trying to get heavily recruited in the baseball world, and I'm not vertically gifted. I'm 5'7" on a good day, and cleats I might be 5'8", and it was one of those things.
Oh, that kind of vertical gift. I thought you didn't
I'm
want
not
to
tall.
climb trees.
No, I'm not tall.
Yeah, okay.
And so when it came to getting recruited, I was being looked over because I wasn't very tall. And so I couldn't avoid me and my height. It was God-given. But what was also God-given was all the other strengths and how I could still get to that next level of baseball, get to that goal that I wanted to achieve. But I also had to focus on what was real, what I had, what I could use. I can't really fix my weakness, but there's also the idea of strengthening your strengths and building up your weaknesses. And
well, I told you about my friend Jacob, who has dwarfism, and never stopped achieving, never stopped loving people, being friendly, being enormously friendly, and went to school to become a licensed radiation expert, sonogram specifically, working in a hospital now. Didn't stop him. I went through my whole life being 6 feet tall, and now I'm not. And people normally with age get shorter and shorter and shorter.
That's not good for me.
But I am getting way shorter, and I don't know how tall I am, and I don't want to know. I asked a nurse one time, you get on the scale in the doctor's office, and it has that device that goes up and it lays the flat piece of metal on your head. And I said, can you tell me how tall I am? You know what she said to me? I don't know how to use that. She was in couldn't have been a pediatrician's office. I wasn't in a pediatrician's office, but I guess she'd never used it before. And I decided right then, I don't want to know how tall I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
There it is.
But I know now because you just said how tall you are, and I think we're probably seeing eye to eye most of the time.
You might still got another inch or two on me.
Well, what difference does it make, really? Okay, there's my thoughts about the conditions that people have. I am not going to be held back because I have all these conditions, and I haven't even mentioned them all. Another one is PTSD, and I have some very bad nights once in a while.
I think we talked about that.
Yeah, we did. I am held back in doing particular things in the way I used to do them. I have to do things in a new way now. I have to be careful about about being on a ladder. I can't really do that because I lose my... Okay, the condition doesn't go away, but it doesn't stop my attitude that, and you mentioned, I teach full-time. I've got a podcast. I'm writing another book, and I have a ministry, and I am not going to stop. I can't imagine stopping.
What keeps the mindset going? The mindset of I'm not giving up, the mindset of I'm going to keep going, or
I don't know. It's self-propelled. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to grit my teeth and go, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, because a lot of these things, the ADHD, it's hard to come back from. The anxiety, you're always fearing of what to come, even though like you don't want to take that next step forward. What are maybe a tool or an idea for a listener, for myself, or for people in my life? How can I help somebody else in that state to where it's hard to take that next step? It's hard. They just want to give up. All they hear is the voice, give up, give up, give up.
Well, I think that they hear not only their own voice, but other people too. Mm-hmm. Other people's telling them that you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't. Maybe listening to what we have to say and passing this kind of an attitude on to somebody else would be something that don't give up. What would you like to do? What would you like to become? I told you about Logan, who was a student here with cerebral palsy, and he wanted to play sports, particularly volleyball. I'm repeating something from the first part of this, but still, I said, well, go talk to the coach and see what you can do. And they brought him onto the team as an assistant to take care of equipment and so forth, and then they let him serve, and he served in ace. Yeah. It makes me emotional to think about it, but I still talk to him. He's in college now. He's in Arizona, and he calls me, and we talk about what he can do. It's just self-propelling within him now, or God-propelling within him now.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. It's like we don't have the strength, but
No.
Jesus, his burden is light. The yoke is easy, and I think that's one of the main ideas. Too is, hey, you don't necessarily have the strength to do it yourself. We've talked this whole time, hey, we're broken. But isn't that the point of Jesus? Isn't that the point of
That's the whole idea.
Needing a Savior? Like cast your qualms, your ideas, your thoughts upon Him and learn to, I guess, let go. But that's the hard part, is a lot of this is a control. A lot of this is a seek for control.
Some of the simplest prayers and what are the ones that I have found most effective. And one prayer that I would suggest is, I just am not ambitious, Lord, or I don't know what I can do with this condition that I have. Can you please help me? And you just stand by and watch Him come into your life and help with that. One thing that I would like from those of you who are listening to send us an email, send me an email at brewingwithjim@gmail.com and tell me what your condition is and what it is that you have to overcome or that you have to live with. It can be essentially anonymous, although there will be your email address there. I'm not interested in your identity. I'm interested in your issue, and I will respond to it, and we will see what kind of encouragement that I could give to you.
Yeah, and that's a wrap for the two-part series of how to deal with the conditions in your life. What are they? How do we go forward from them? And a big one is just realizing that it's there, understanding, reaching out to somebody, because the Lord works. I mean, He might send an angel, and it might be a person, and it usually is. And
sometimes you can't tell the difference.
And sometimes it's a podcast. So if this is you listening and you're sending it to somebody else, like sometimes it's just somebody needs to hear something new or something different. So, yeah, please reach out to us at brewingwithjim@gmail.com. We love the listenership. We love you guys, and you're not alone in this. Please reach out. We're here for you, and we'll be back with more content next week. Thank you so much for listening.
Yes.
The topics covered and answers offered in Brewing with Jim mine the wisdom attained from a life of pastoral ministry and care. They do not constitute professional or clinical training or expertise in the areas of counseling or mental health. CVCS and its podcast network want to provide a platform for the discipleship of our community. Brewing with Jim is our attempt to foster that environment in a format that is accessible and open for all to partake in. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and may or may not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Capistrano Valley Christian Schools or its faculty. The material and information presented here are for general information purposes only.
This episode has been a production of the Capistrano Valley Christian Schools Podcast Network. Capistrano Valley Christian Schools is a Christian JK-12 school in San Juan Capistrano, California. Be sure to check out, subscribe to, and leave a review of this show and the other shows on our network on your podcast player of choice. Doing so supports the school community in a multitude of ways. For more information about the CVCS Podcast Network or any of our other shows, check out cvcs.org or email podcasts@cvcs.org. On behalf of the whole network, this is Mr. Jasper saying thank you again for listening and stay tuned for more.